Good morning, everyone. My name is Bob Hoster, and I provide IT audit services for the firm's clients. My presentation is regarding data privacy best practices for governmental agencies. And I've broken this presentation out into four different sections. First, we're going to define what privacy is and why it is important. We're going to talk about some various privacy laws that are effective for government agencies. We're going to talk about some data governance best practices. And finally, we're going to conclude with some things that you can include in a cybersecurity incident response plan that you may take back to your particular organization. So first, let's define what privacy is. Privacy encompasses the rights and obligations of individuals and organizations with respect to the classification, collection, use, disclosure, and retention of personal information. And today, trends are showing that companies every day collect, use, profile, disclose, and analyze customer information for their business purposes or other marketing purposes. But unfortunately, some of this information is misused, stolen, or abused. And this has led to a trust gap between the business and their customers. Now, if we were to look at how information regarding data privacy is handled by the three different types of stakeholders. They are customers, businesses, and governments. First, customers are obviously concerned about how and why their information is collected, used, disclosed, and retained. Because when they give that information to businesses, they are giving that business obviously the trust factor to protect their information. From a business perspective, they are trying to strike a balance between the collection and use of the information, as well as making sure they are using good privacy practices to reduce the risk of obvious breach or a leak of data. Now, from the government's perspective, through legislation, they are taking increased action on growing concerns about privacy to protect the rights of citizens. But on the flip side, the government is also trying to figure out how they can better manage the data that they store for the customers that they serve. Some laws and regulations that apply to privacy. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some of the major legislative laws that are out there right now. First, we have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. This is privacy-related laws that apply to financial institutions, banks, credit unions. Basically, if you have a deposit or a lending relationship or any other type of banking relationship with either any of these type of entities, GLBA requires financial institutions to have controls and security safeguards in place for the data that they've collected from you from results of either opening a loan account or a deposit account, to making sure that that is handled and secured properly. The next one we're all probably familiar with, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, also known as HIPAA. This covers medical providers, doctors, hospitals, and anyone that is handling medical data. Those privacy notices we receive in the mail every year from our local medical providers are required to sign when we go to the doctor. This is all part of the HIPAA Act. Another act is the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act of 2003, also known as FACT-A. This is basically involves credit reports and credit scores, and also to prevent identity theft among credit reporting. Basically, the act is there to ensure that credit reporting is reported accurately, and that fraudulent credit activities are also reported on a person's credit report. Another regulation that is not too well known in the United States, but is considered the most worldwide known privacy law, is the General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR. This was passed by the European Union and is considered the toughest privacy law worldwide. It only applies to organizations who collect data from people that are in the European Union. And finally, there are various state privacy laws which we need to be considered, but these vary, and the scope of these vary among state to state. Next, I'm going to discuss some data governance best practices. And the first thing that probably you want to adopt is to adopt a data governance strategy, which dictates how you manage and protect the customer information you collect. From this, you'll then want to establish and implement cybersecurity policies. Some examples there include an information security policy, an acceptable use policy, and even a data classification policy. These are all important components of data governance strategy. You'll want to limit access to data. Basically, your access needs to be restricted only to a person's job responsibilities for the need that they have access to that data. Another important component is to conduct a data audit. Basically, where and how is your data stored? Is it stored internally on your own organization systems, or is it stored externally with vendors that you may have contracts with to help manage your IT environment? And also, you may want to look at also other data that you may be storing. Is there any old data that you may consider purging that is no longer of interest to your organization? Another important component is to encrypt data at both rest and in transit. This means putting appropriate security controls over your data to ensure that data cannot be intercepted or relayed to another hacker or a legal organization that may put the data to their own evil use. Next, we want to implement password protections around the data, making sure we have good password controls. You'll want to also implement software updates of applications that store and transmit data. A lot of times, some organizations do not maintain the most current patches in their systems and servers to help protect the data. You'll want to establish and execute a solid infrastructure over your network, particularly regarding how people can access the data within your network. You'll want to train your employees to be diligent with data, including making sure that they understand that the data that they are working with, whether they store it on your organization's network or they store it on their laptop, that they're supposed to maintain appropriate access and be responsible for how they store that data on their systems, making sure that they don't store it on a system that is considered personal, like a personal laptop. And finally, you'll want to implement a cybersecurity incident response plan. And so, as part of that, a cybersecurity incident response plan can be classified into 5 different phases. And the most important phase is phase 1. Well, first, let's define what a cybersecurity incident response plan is. It's a document that gives IT and cybersecurity professionals instructions on how to respond to a data breach, a data leak, a ransomware attack, or a loss of sensitive information. And as I said, the most important phase is phase 1, which is the preparation phase. This is the most critical phase of all to ensure that you have a good cybersecurity incident response plan. Key parts of this phase include the following. First, you want to identify the members of your incident response team and their contact information. And it's appropriate to make sure that you update this plan regularly because due to changes in organizational management or employees. You'll want to define each member's roles and responsibilities within the plan, what their roles are, who's going to be the team to diagnose if a breach has occurred, who's going to be the team that's going to be doing the communication with anybody that might have been affected by it as a result of the data breach. Next step would be ensure that your employees are properly trained regarding their incident response roles and responsibilities in the event a data breach occurs. A key component is to test the plan itself. Here you'll want to develop incident response drill scenarios and regularly conduct mock data breaches to evaluate the effectiveness of your incident response plan. And finally, you want to ensure that all aspects of your incident response plan, including training, execution, and any hardware and software resources that you need, are approved and funded in advance. Some questions to ask under the preparation phase. Has everyone been trained on your organization's security policies? Have your security policies and incident response plan been approved by the appropriate management? Does your response team know their roles and require notifications need to make in the case of a breach? And have you conducted testing of the plan, such as mock drills of different various breach scenarios to ensure your plan is working effectively? So that is the most important phase. Now, the next four phases I'm going to talk about only apply if you have an actual breach. Phase two, this is the identification phase, and this is where your technical IT team is more involved in determining whether you've been breached and where it has originated from. Some questions to address in this phase is we want to identify when did the event happen, how was it discovered, who discovered it, have there any other areas been impacted in your organization as a result of the breach, what is the scope of the compromise, how does it affect your operations, and has the source or point of entry of the event been discovered. This, again, I think is where your technical IT team will be the most involved in this phase to help you identify where the breach occurred. Phase three involves the containment phase. This is where you contain the breach so it doesn't spread and cause further damage within your IT environment in your organization. Some questions to address in this part include what's been done to contain the breach short-term and long-term. Have you discovered, has malware that been quarantined from the rest of the IT environment to ensure it doesn't damage any other servers or network resources that you have? What sort of backups do you have in place to restore your environment to the original state before the breach occurred? Does your remote access require multi-factor authentication? And the next important thing is to review all access credentials, which is user logons, to ensure that all user logons are legitimate, hardened, and not been changed. Sometimes hackers come in and set up their own login credentials to have access to your sensitive data. And have you recently applied all security patches and updates to all your network servers, systems, and applications? Phase four is what they call the eradication phase. This is the process of restoring and returning your affected systems and devices back to how they were your original business environment were functioning before the breach occurred. Some questions to address in doing this. When can your systems be returned to production? Basically, this is forecasting the estimated downtime that you're going to incur as a result of the breach. Have all your systems been patched, hardened, and tested? Can the system be restored from a trusted backup to its original state? How long will the affected systems be monitored, and what will you look for when monitoring to see if a subsequent breach occurs after you made the changes to your current system? And what tools have you implemented to ensure similar attacks will not reoccur, such as file integrity monitoring or intrusion detection and protection systems? And the last part of this incident response plan is what they call post-incident activities. Once you've completed the investigation and you restore all your systems to their original state, it's good to hold a meeting with all the incident response team members to discuss what you learned from the data breach. Basically, what went well, what didn't go well. What changes need to be made? Some questions to address this is what changes need to be made to your security infrastructure? How should your employees be trained differently? What weakness did the breach exploit? And how we ensure a similar breach doesn't happen again? Again, post-incident activities is an important phase of having a good, robust incident security response plan. Are there any questions?